Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Syfy Sistas podcast, where we give you our point of view. I'm Tamia Harper, and I'm joined by my sisters, Yvette Blackman-Tom.
Hello.
And Sabrina Wood.
Whoop, whoop.
And we have an amazing guest here today. We are really excited to bring this guest to you all. And I'm going to let Sabrina do the introductions because I might fangirl a little bit too hard. So go for it, Sabrina.
Thanks, Tamia. Yes, everybody. We have Marc Scott Zicree here. Yes, can we all hear it? Yay!
Woo!
And if you don't know who Marc is, shame on you, Star Trek fans, but I will break it down for you anyway. Marc is an American sci-fi author, television writer, screenwriter. He's written for all the major studios, networks, including Paramount, Universal, Disney, Sony, Columbia, MGM, New Line, CBS, NBC, ABC, Syfy, Discovery, Nickelodeon, Network. I mean,
all the letters.
Everybody. When you go on his YouTube page and he says that he's done 100 hours of TV, my man is not lying. All right, everything you ever saw, Marc wrote something in it. But what we are talking to him about today is one of our absolute favorite Star Trek episodes ever. Not in Deep Space Nine, not in just any one particular franchise. I mean, of all friggin' time. And we are going to talk about ever. We are talking about Far Beyond the Stars. And in honor of the 24th anniversary of the telecast of the show, we have the author of the story here, and he's going to break it down and tell us how this incredible story came to be. Welcome, Marc Scott Zicree. Yay!
It's great to be here. It's really great to be here, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Star Trek, the original Star Trek debuted when I was 10, and it just blew my mind. It was unlike any TV show that had ever been done before. I recorded it on reel-to-reel audio tape in case it never aired again, because that was the best that I could do at that time. There were no VCRs. There was no way to watch it again when you wanted to watch it. And I thought, if it never shows again, at least I'll be able to listen to it. And I was a huge Star Trek fan, and everyone in my life knew that. And so my mom, I was being raised by a divorced mom, a single mom, and she had a boyfriend named Eddie Leroy, and he had been a comic in the 50s, and he had his own TV show. He was a protege of Milton Berle. And one day he said, get in the car, I've got a surprise for you. And he drove me to this apartment building, and he knocked on the door. This is when Star Trek was running on NBC. And the door opened, and it was Nichelle Nichols. And she was astonishing. She was gorgeous. And she gave me one of her own scripts signed to me. And all of the Uhura lines were circled because that's how she would memorize her lines. This was not Xerox. This was Mimeo. They didn't have Xerox machines back then. And I was a 10-year-old kid, but I was a smart kid. And I said, well, do you have any more of these? And she reached in a waste paper basket and pulled out 5 more scripts from 5 other episodes.
Wow.
And she also gave me a signed photo, and she was just astonishing. And we corresponded. And the reason she was throwing out the scripts at that point, when normally she saved them, was that she was about to quit the show. And of course, we all know the story where Martin Luther King said, no, you must not quit Star Trek because it is the one black role, one African-American role on television that isn't a servant, isn't, subordinate. She's a dominant, she's a powerful, she's her own woman, she's part of this crew, she's an equal. And so she stayed. Ironically, years later, when I did Space Command, the project I'm working on now, we actually cast Nichelle and shot a scene with her just before the pandemic. And I brought the scrapbook I had kept of Star Trek from when I was 10 that included the letters she had written me and the photos she had signed me. And we sat flipping through it on all the articles I clipped about her. And it was wonderful 50 years later.
Yeah.
And,
oh, my God. That must have been so cool.
What a special memory.
It was a dream come true. It was a dream come true, and now she's in Space Command. But so I grew up, and another thing I want to tell you about, because this is not well known, or I don't think it's known at all. I asked Eddie, my mom's boyfriend, how he was friends with Nichelle Nichols at the time, and he said, well, he'd known her for a number of years, and before Star Trek, she was having a very hard time getting work, getting cast, and so to make ends meet, she was actually doing nude modeling for art classes. and he would pick her up after the classes, and she would be in tears because it was so, terrible. And he would say to her, "Don't worry, there's something better coming. Just hang in there. Just you hang in there." And because of this friendship, and because he gave her this window to the future, they stayed friends, of course. And so the point being that she just wasn't just someone who was cast in Star Trek the day she arrived in town and life was a bowl of cherries,
Right.
Like she had to fight that fight, and she had to have friends who would say, "No, you just hang in there. There's a future, there's a better future." And the thing about Star Trek also was Star Trek said, "There's a better future. We can make a better future, but we have to make it." Yeah. And people forget that Star Trek debuted and ran during the depths of the Vietnam War and the riots in the streets and Martin Luther King's assassination and Robert Kennedy's assassination. These things happened during the run of Star Trek, and yet Gene Roddenberry had the vision to say, "No, we can have a better future where everyone treats everyone like an equal, where everyone's value is seen and allowed." And that was a brave thing. And of course, you guys certainly know that Nichelle Nichols then went on to be a champion for women in space and African Americans in space and all of that. And so while she was doing all that stuff, I was growing up. And couldn't stay a kid forever, though I still try. And so I became a television writer. I sold my first short story when I was 19. And that was at the Clarion Writers Workshop, which is the leading science workshop in the country. Wow. And one of my teachers was Samuel R. Delaney, the great Chip Delaney.
Oh, yeah.
Get out of here.
Yeah, and also Roger Zelazny and Jim Wolfe and Damon Knight and Kate Wilhelm and Joe Haldeman. I mean, this was amazing.
Wow.
And the other students included Kim Stanley Robinson. He was one of the students. And
oh, my word.
So it was quite a...
You're about to die.
Right? We're dying over here. So, Sci-Fi Sister Book Club just exploded. A collective mind explosion.
Yeah. Yeah, it was phenomenal. And so, and so I'd always been knowing that I would be either an artist or a writer. And I was actually in the middle of my art degree at UCLA. So when I went to Clarion, but when I sold that first short story to Damon Knight for $50, I realized people would pay me for my writing. And I'm going to be a writer. That's what I want to do. And I came back to LA and finished my art degree. And but at the same time, I knew I wanted to work in TV as a writer because writers run television. And this is a bit of a long journey to far beyond the stars, but I'm getting there. And
You're good.
So I started writing right out of college. I started writing a book called The Twilight Zone Companion, so I could learn how to make great television. Because the three shows that made me want to be a writer were Twilight Zone, Outer Limits, and Star Trek, the original versions of those three shows. And Rod Serling, of course, was another great champion of an optimistic future, of a hopeful future. And it's interesting because he wrote one great episode of The Twilight Zone called The Big Tall Wish that starred Ivan Dixon. And it's about a black...
Brody Johnson?
Yes. But the cool thing about that, and what people almost never notice about that episode, is it's not about race. It's not about being black. It's not a civil rights story. It's a human story about a broken down fighter and the little boy who makes the magic come true, but then the fighter's too beaten down to let the magic stand. And he can't believe, and it's a heartbreaking story, but it has a lead black cast. It's got Steve McQuarrie as the little boy. It's got a black mother and Ivan Dixon before Hogan's Heroes. I mean, this was terrific, So I was raised with that vision of possibility, and so that was very much in my mind and in my heart. And so I wrote The Twilight Zone Companion to learn about TV. So I started that book when I was, I think, 21 years old or so. And by the time I was 22 or 23, I was writing for television. So I started in animation, Smurfs, He-Man, Super Friends, Real Ghostbusters, all these fun shows, and learned my craft. And then jumped over to live action when I developed Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future as a show. And by then, I was in live action, so I was story editing Friday the 13th, the series, and writing for a lot of different shows. And that's when Star Trek: The Next Generation came out, right? And that was a great opportunity. And when I was story editing Friday the 13th, the series, I was on the Paramount lot. And so even before Star Trek: The Next Generation debuted, I was there with seeing the cast walking around in uniform. They'd sit at a big table in the, in the restaurant for lunch on the Paramount lot, all that stuff. So I went in and I pitched a story called First Contact, and that sold. It was about a planet that develops warp drive, and the Enterprise is sent to make first contact when the prime directive shuts off. And that was very fun. But DS9 came about, of course, and I became friends with Armin Shimmerman, and he was a dear soul. He still is. We're still friends, and he's in Space Command, in fact. And Armin Shimmerman played Quark, and I went in to pitch to DS9, and I knew I wanted to do something just with First Contact, which opened up Star Trek in a way. It had told a story that hadn't been told within the Star Trek universe, but didn't violate the Star Trek universe. In other words, I was aware of everything they'd done, but wanted to kind of pry it open a little bit and expand the envelope. So when I was a kid, I noticed that all the Star Trek, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, a lot of the writers were writing for those same all of those shows, and they were also writing the books I was reading and the short stories I was reading. So it was Theodore Sturgeon, Harlan Ellison, Ray Bradbury, on and on, and Dorothy Fontana, of course. And so I started, as soon as I was a teenager, I started going to science fiction conventions and meeting those writers, and they became friends and mentors. And Ted Sturgeon, when I met him when I was a teenager, he was this giant of science fiction. I mean, he would go to science fiction conventions. It would be like God had appeared, and yet he was living this impoverished life. He was living in Silver Lake, which is the time was sort of a poverty-stricken part of LA, and he wasn't even living in an apartment. He was living in a converted laundry room, and the doorway was so low, it was like a Morlock doorway, that I hit my head on the lintel one time, and it was like, but there inside his little mini living space was like the Hugo and the Nebula, and I thought, Jesus, all these people who wrote science fiction back in the 50s for a penny a word, for 5 cents a word, for Astounding and Galaxy and all these great magazines, you wouldn't have Star Trek or Star Wars or any of that if not for these guys who wrote for the love of it, who weren't famous, who weren't known, but who basically created this future that we were now living in, the space, and with landing on the moon and all of this. None of this would have been possible except for these people of vision. And so I initially pitched a story where it was originally going to be Jake Sisko, Ben's son. He was an aspiring writer, but he was going to be. It was back in the 50s. They were all science fiction writers, and you would get to see the actors without the prosthetics, so you could see them. And it was going to be dealing with why science fiction is important. Why is it not just escapist crap, right? Because it tells a future story. And Harlan, I'd listened to a tape that Harlan Ellison had done, reminiscing about writing for the pulps. And one thing he mentioned was that back then, because you were being paid so little, you would have to really hustle to get assignments. And he said on a certain day, that would be the day that the cover paintings would be delivered to the magazines, and often they would commission the cover painting before they had a story and then you would write the story to match the cover. And he mentioned that the one that he had a hell of a time with was it was a woman sunbathing on the top of a New York apartment building, and there was a giant praying mantis looking over the lip of the building at her. And he had to talk to the editor about this as though it was the greatest illustration, the greatest painting, the greatest story in the universe, and to get the gig. And he did. And I actually have a copy of that issue. But that started my head turning in terms of the notion of, a cover with Deep Space Nine that would then, our guy would have to write, is the issue of what Star Trek did, which is telling the truth. Because do you tell the lie or do you tell the truth? And I pitched it to Hans Beimler, who had been my boss on another show, and Hans really liked it. And he said, let me see if I can sell this. And a year went by, and it was, and one day I was a producer on Sliders at that point, writing episodes, etc., at Universal in my office, and I get a call, and it's Hans, and he says, good news, Mark, you just sold, Far Beyond the Stars. And I said, oh, great timing, Hans, because I was on Sliders. I was writing 2 episodes back to back. And But the only time we would have to get together was during my lunch break. I drove over the hill from Universal to Paramount, and there was a restaurant next to Paramount called Nichols, and it's no longer there. And I met for lunch with the entire writing team of DS9. So it was Ron Moore and Brian Fuller and Ira Bear and Hans Beimler and Richard Manning and on and on. I mean, it's just an amazing, amazing group of writers. And we started batting the story around. And Ira had figured out he said, let's do it about race. And the moment he said that, I thought, that's great. That's great. He said, we love the Twilight Zone. We want to do it like a Twilight Zone episode. So it's just sort of like this vision the prophets are giving him. We don't have to explain it more than that.
Right.
It's going to be, but basically we're going to have it be Ben, not his kid. Ben's going to go back. Ben Sisko is going to go back, and he's going to be a science fiction writer. And one of the ideas I had was they're science fiction writers. So although it's played by all those actors, they're not the character in the future. It's not Ben going, well, my God, I'm back in time. It's like they are these people back then, and so it's that issue of when he said, am I the dreamer or the dream? You're both, And so we started batting the story around, and I realized that Ira was a great showrunner because he took the dangerous choice, because we all knew this was going to be one of the great landmark episodes of Star Trek. We also knew it was going to be extremely difficult to get the studio to say yes, because it was so controversial. But we all were very excited, and so we nailed down the basics of the story at that lunch, and Ira said, and Ira over that lunch was even thinking strategically about, we'll have Avery direct it as well as star in it, because that will also help push it through the studio hierarchy, because he's the star of our show, but it was also, we all approved because it was a great idea, of course. And so then that weekend I outlined the episode, and I called Harlan Ellison and asked questions about that era. I said, were there any Black science fiction writers writing under a white pseudonym? And he said, no, but there was a mainstream writer who was doing that. And he told me about that writer, and we talked about all this stuff, and I was thinking of it sort of initially, it was going to be it was going to be Armin playing the editor, sort of an H.L. Gold kind of guy at Galaxy, and Renee was going to be the writer who kind of was the conscience of the thing, and the liberal, sort of the idea that he was like a blacklisted writer from Hollywood who was sort of slumming, coming to New York to write science fiction because he couldn't get Trumbo movie work. Yes, but then they were worried that it might seem anti-Semitic because Armin's Jewish, and if he was the guy, stomping on, and so they said, let's swap it so it's Renee, and Armin's the more like the Harlan Ellison kind of guy, and that was fine because, of course, John W. Campbell was thin and austere and had a big nose, and it worked just fine in terms of the science fiction history. And everyone was just so into it. Everyone loved the idea, and it was also extremely gracious of Harlan to take my call and answer my questions, because he hated Star Trek because of what happened.
What happened.
When I wrote and co-wrote and directed and executive produced the George Takei Star Trek episode that I did, I invited Harlan to the premiere. And Harlan said, I love you, Mark, but I can't go to a Star Trek thing. I just can't. So the fact that when I was doing Far Beyond the Stars, he would call me and answer my questions and be very gracious and not badmouth Star Trek was really quite something. And so I wrote the outline, and they were fast tracking it because they knew this was going to be a great episode. They were going to put a ton of money into it. And it was really going to be their flagship episode, and so they wanted to roll camera on it within a matter of weeks. And Ira was very, because it was sweeps weeks. That's when they determine the advertising on shows. So you want to get a good rating. You knew this would get a good rating. So I did the outline. The outline came out great. The only major difference in my outline from the episode was, instead of having Worf be a baseball player, I had him be a boxer. And I I
Back
had
in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and they basically, I think it was that I was thinking of Jack Johnson, and so I was having
Right. That's
so
yeah.
so Dax, she was going to be a sort of a socialite who's having a romance with him on the down low, on the quiet.
Oh boy.
The cops were basically going to beat him to death. So it wasn't Jake who gets killed; it was Worf, and that was the main difference. But it still was the same basic point, which is cops are killing innocent black people,
Right.
And, but that was fine, and so that was a minor thing. But so I wrote the outline. The outline came out great. It was the same story as what you saw, and normally, at someone at my level, I would have done the script, and that was my expectation, of course. But Hans called and said, "Well, Iris decided that we're going to do it in house," and I said, "Because you're working on another show." So I said, "Well, let me call Ira." And I called Ira and I said, "What's the deal here? I don't get caught off at story." And he said, "Well, you're working on Sliders." And he said, "Listen, I'll tell you what, if you quit your job on Sliders, I'll let you write the script." And I considered about 90 seconds because I knew this was going to be one of the great Star Trek episodes. But I was writing 2 episodes of Sliders back to back. Now I totally had the bandwidth to do that script. I wouldn't have broken a sweat. But I couldn't quit Sliders because they were relying on me, and I was writing 2 episodes back to back. World Killer and Slide Cage, and so I had to say, okay, I can't do it, and so I can't, knife my coworkers in the back. So, but fortunately, Ira and Hans Beimler, Ira Bear and Hans Beimler, I knew they'd be writing the script from my outline. I knew that they were going to do a terrific job, so I wasn't worried about that at all. But simply that was fast tracked. That was the reason that Ira made that decision, because he didn't think I could do 3 scripts in 3 weeks. But obviously I could have. But that said, I knew it was going to be a terrific episode, and Armin was thrilled because I said, even before I wrote it, I said, "Armin, I'm going to do an episode where you don't have to wear. People are going to see your face."
Right.
Now the interesting irony was when I wrote Slide Cage for Sliders, I wrote a role specifically for Armin, and I mentioned in that episode, the character mentions that his favorite TV show was Beauty and the Beast, and he says, not the Disney one, the one with Ron Perlman. And the reason was, it was an in-joke because both Armin and I wrote, Armin played a character named Pascal in that show, and I wrote for that show, and it was an in-joke about Armin, that this character says. The funny thing was there's 1 day overlap between the shooting on Slide Cage and the shooting on Far Beyond the Stars, and so they wouldn't let Armin go, and so another actor had to play the role in Sliders, though oddly the line stayed, so the line makes no sense at all. But, but the amazing thing was the 2 studios were shooting my work at the same week, the same time.
Wow.
Universal was shooting one of my Sliders episodes, and Paramount was shooting Far Beyond the Stars. So I got photos of myself in the same clothes with both casts at 2 different studios. And so it's the photo from Slide Cage with the entire cast, all, Jerry O'Connell and all those folks in the Cro-Mags and all of that. And then I went over the hill to Paramount. And the funny thing is, it's one of the most boring looking photos ever, because it's guys in a 1950s office. It's like not on DS9. It's not with the prosthetics or any of that. So, but I went there, and they were shooting a scene, and Avery Brooks was directing, and I knew Armin, and I had met Renee, but I didn't know Avery. So while he's directing, he's kind of looking at me and wondering who I am. And he finished, he says, "Okay, cut, lunch break," and everyone starts filing out. And then I walk up to him and I say, "Hello, Mr. Brooks, my name's Marc Zicree. I came up with this story." And he said, everybody, stop. And they all stopped. And he put his arm around me and he said, "Say to them what you said to me." And I said, "I came up with a story." And he said, "He came up with the story." And then they all applauded. Hey! And so it was a wonderful moment. And the episode came out, and it was breathtaking. It was unlike any Star Trek episode before or since. And it was incredible. I actually had lunch a little while later with Brock Peters, who played, his father, and the preacher, and again there was that amazing moment where they're in the ambulance and there's the stars, am I the dreamer or the dream? You're both. And it was the issue of, it was a profoundly truthful issue about race relations, because it had the I mean, think of it. A major American studio says cops are racist and they kill Black people.
Right.
There's no, oh, well, maybe there's two sides to this story. No, there was no equivocation. It was just there. And we're talking, like, I should say, 24 years ago. So that's, so it's a phenomenal, but it's also the other truth of why does science fiction matter? And science fiction matters because we can present a better future, and in presenting it, the possibility is created, and then it leads us somewhere. And I always talk about Martin Luther King when he gave the speech about I see the sons of slaves and the children of slaves and the children of slave owners sitting together at the table of peace and blah, blah, blah. He's telling a science fiction story because he's describing a future that does not yet exist. But in describing it, he's helping to create it. It's a science fiction story, just like Far Beyond the Stars is a science fiction story. It's why we do this. We, the ones who do it right, like Harlan, like Ted Sturgeon, like Chip Delaney, we are coming. Yeah. Yes. And Octavia Butler, another friend.
Yeah.
I met Octavia when she was in the writing class that Ted Sturgeon taught, where I first met Ted, and when I was a teenager. But
yeah, please do tell, because she's a personal goddess.
She was amazing. Yes. And so I kept in touch with her. She died far too young, of course.
Far too young.
But see, the great thing about being a writer is that you've written things that will outlive you. You know that you've made a mark on the world. I love television because it's millions of people, and here we are 24 years later talking about something that I came up with that has maintained its truth and its power. And the fascinating thing was, a couple of years ago, for the 20th anniversary, I think it was, before the pandemic, they at the Las Vegas Star Trek convention, they screened Far Beyond the Stars, and then they had a panel with all of us sitting and talking about it. And while they were screening it for the audience, back in the green room behind the screen, they had the episode running on the monitor there. Now, normally in the green room, actors are calling their agents and people are running in and out and nobody's paying attention to what's on the monitor. I went in and there was the entire cast of Deep Space Nine and the entire cast of Star Trek Discovery watching this episode.
Wow.
And you could have heard a pin drop because the Star Trek Discovery cast did not know about Far Beyond the Stars. They did not know of that episode. And that was, of course, Black Lives Matter was just, things were happening in the real world. And it was like, holy cow, this is more relevant now, sadly, tragically,
unfortunately,
than it was back then. And so again, it's just, this is why we love Star Trek. This is why we love science fiction, because, if you write something that's about, well, I always talk about Rod Serling, where if Rod had stayed a mainstream writer, which is what he had intended to do, people wouldn't know about Requiem for a Heavy Order Patterns. He'd be forgotten, just like Frederick Rose or Patty Chayefsky or any of those writers. They're like dusty names, and you really have to be an aficionado to know who they are. But if you say Rod Serling, Twilight Zone, science fiction has a shelf life that other fiction doesn't. And I mean, some of it does. There's some high watermarks, but science fiction much more bang for your buck, So that's my journey to that. And then with Space Command, well, then I did the Star Trek episode with George Takei, which I did outside of the studio system, and that was the Great Sulu episode, and World Enough in Time, which you can watch on Mr. Syfy, my YouTube channel. And it was nominated for the Hugo and the Nebula, and then I created Space Command, and my fans gave me $3 million, but I want to cast enormous. I don't want to cast diversity for diversity's sake. I want to cast it because it's the world I live in.
Right.
Sort of like, I like variety. I don't, Jesus, I don't want to be part of a world where everyone looks like me and nobody ever disagrees with me. I mean, come on, but more than that. So I'm casting, my friend Christina Moses is in both. I cast her in of World Enough in Time, and now she's in Space Command. She's starring in a Million Little what is it? A Million Little Lies? What was that? A Million Little Things? Whatever. It's like Sean Aby. Yeah. But she's terrific, and but there's a lot of Latino actors, Black actors, everybody in the pool. So it's yeah. So enough of my monologue. Feel free to ask.
No, we loved that. That was like so
thank you, listeners. That's it for the Syfy Sisters.
Yeah. But,
show.
See, the wonderful thing
but Mark, what I really loved about this episode is it's, and I read this in a couple places where people were saying that it's so sci-fi, even though it's not particularly Star Trek, like they are not in their costumes and they are not in their makeup.
Yeah.
And we're in this other location in the 50s, but I love the way it went in and out and back and forth.
Yes.
1 minute Cisco's looking at the pad, and then he's talking to he's in the office, and that flipping back and forth just made it seem so. You had to pay attention.
Yes.
What is happening? I don't understand what's happening. It was a story about racism in the 50s and why Black people can't write science fiction, and why even in the 2020s we're still having problems writing science fiction. But
and one thing I read. Yeah, one thing Ira and I talked about over that lunch with everybody was the idea that he's writing under a white pseudonym, and so during the day he's working with his white coworkers, and then but when it's like photo day, he's not supposed to come. No one's supposed to know he's Black. But then he goes home at night to Harlem, and it's like, and his Black friends say, "What the hell are you doing? You're writing about a future in which we're not there. What are you doing?"
Right.
And I was given that cover illustration of DS9, the 1950s version of it. It's like. I had that moment where he looks in the window of his apartment and he sees his reflection. He sees his face. And it's like, do I write a lie or do I write the truth? Do I write a future in which we exist in a future, and he makes the bold choice, the dangerous choice of writing the truth. But that's the only way things change. Yeah. And I also remember there was a great issue of EC Comics in the 50s where an astronaut is sent to this planet of robots to determine whether or not to let them into this galactic federation. And there's orange robots and blue robots, and I think the orange robots treat the blue robots like shit or whatever. And finally the guy says at the end of his story, Joe Orlando was the artist on it, no, you're not ready to be entered in because you're bigots, basically. And then he goes to the spaceship and he takes off his helmet, and he's a Black guy, and it's beautifully drawn, but it's just that whole issue of race in science fiction, and I thought it was important, and of course Ray Bradbury wrote the story in the Martian Chronicles that I don't think it's in the current edition anymore, but it was about all the Black people leaving Earth and going to Mars, and that was like a great story because it was like, okay, I mean, let's look at this,
Well,
I think one of the things about that resonates so true about Far Beyond the Stars is like, what you're getting to, what you get from Benny is not just validating his truth and his existence, but the important thing is, if I don't see myself in the future,
right.
I might as well just give up now. We might as well just all die now. Like I can't control if somebody else sees me in the future. I have to see myself there.
Of course, yes, and that's why the original Star Trek was so important and so powerful, because there's Asians, there's Black women, powerful Black women. There's it was very, very important because visibility and legitimacy. But more than that. There was one other difference between my outline and the final episode, which is in my storyline, when Benny has the breakdown, Armin's character basically takes a stand and he says, look, unless you publish that story, I walk. And he basically throws the weight of his credibility behind this, and the story does get out to the public. And because by my lights, it has to get out to the public. The story has to be there. Now Ira took the other route, which is Benny breaks down and bad guys win essentially. But that doesn't matter, because still there's the fact that a major American studio is saying, hey, here's the truth, and so the ending is less important in that regard than the truth getting out. And so in a way, the story gets out via that episode.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like the ending that they took was more realistic in a way.
Very realistic.
Yes,
like you have the white savior happening. When the white guy says, "How it's going to go," so I would have been, "No, you didn't just do that to me."
But it also, but I mean, the ending that you posed also is something that we're all rooting for.
Yes,
as the
yes,
episode
yes.
goes on, we're rooting for these people to speak up
Yes.
and to, you know, and to back up their quote unquote friend.
Yes.
You know,
Yes. I think either ending is legitimate. I mean, because again, it all boils down to individual courage. You know, either, I mean, and one of the things that's about Star Trek that's so great is, I mean, the original Star Trek and all of the good Star Trek since, is that they're a family. They're there for each other. You know, it's not about individual benefit. It's about, we're all in this together, and we all, you know, take care of each other. You know, it's like that, and selflessness, and that's so important. And you know, so yeah. But I can certainly I see the ending that Ira put on it as valid as well. You know, because you know, sometimes we win and sometimes we don't.
Yeah.
But the episode won. You know, so that was the amazing triumph. I mean, and Ira was very brave to do it. I mean, he really had to take on the studio, and he's a tough guy. He's a tough guy.
So Ira's idea of making Avery the director really was to get over that obstacle with the studio.
Yes,
because,
well, not just that. It was also to legitimize the story. You know, so in other words, it's a black director. You know, it's like, it's not the
he signed off on it.
Yeah, exactly. And everyone agreed to that idea. Though I'll tell you one thing, because directing that episode was very difficult with Avery pulling such a heavy foot as the lead. And there was one time that really came back to bite him, which was when he has the breakdown, when he has that amazing monologue. The first time round, see, back then when we were shooting with film, now we shoot digitally. When you were shooting with film, before you did any take, you would say to the DP and the camera crew, check the gate. And what that means is, see how much film is left in the magazine, because the film magazine only holds 10 minutes of film. And so if it's going to be a long take, you want to change the magazine out so it won't run out of film. So when Avery did that amazing monologue the first time through, suddenly you would hear in the middle of the scene this sort of flapping sound.
Oh, no.
No.
Knew what that was, which was the magazine had run out of film. He had not told them to check the gate.
Yeah.
And so he gives it his all. He throws everything he's got into it. And then it's like cut. And then it's like, boss, we have to go again. You know?
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
So I think that the final version of that monologue, they used what they shot of that first take, and then they cut away to someone else for a moment, just so that they put in the last.
Okay.
But
wow.
Yeah, because I was like, that couldn't have been more than one take.
No,
that was powerful.
I think everyone just like the blood drained. It was like, oh no. That's how Hollywood works. You gotta pull it out from wherever you can pull it out from. You know, you have a job to do. You know, But it was terrific, and you know, we're all of us. I mean, we knew going in that it was going to be one of the great episodes. There was no doubt.
Like the one person that anybody can really, you guys who were involved with this particular episode, the one time you can ask somebody, like, so did you know when you were making this? You know, I mean, that's like the most annoying question that you can ever ask somebody.
No,
you know, but
even at that lunch when we were all sitting around just talking about it, because every time there was a choice for Ira to take the more dangerous choice or the less dangerous choice, he took the more dangerous choice. That's rare. Yeah. And so when he said, okay, let's have it be, you know, this, and this, it's like, okay, that sounds great. And then when I saw the episode, my God, it had like period buses and newsstands and Hasidic Jews and nuns and and then it was the level of production was way beyond what normally you would see in a TV show of that era. And they really, I mean, everyone knew it was going to be a jewel. Everyone knew. And, you know, and so that was, and also the more references we had, not just to the world of 1950 science fiction, because I put a ton of that stuff in there, but also, and because we all were thinking, okay, this writer is Isaac Asimov, the robot stories. We were thinking about who they would have been. And, but also we were thinking about, you know, Avery was also bringing the jazz influences and a lot of that stuff, and wearing that period, you know, that hat that he wears.
The kufi.
So the more that it was, the more authenticity we could get into, and the more that we could bring that stuff. So every department, and Mike Akuda and the art team, of course, had a great time doing those fake science fiction covers. You know?
I'm sure they had a great time with that one.
Yeah, they did. So
I love the fact that you brought in. I'm a huge baseball fan, like history of baseball, and I'm a New Yorker. So bringing in the New York Giants that has always been great because that's my stepfather loved the New York Giants. They're from Harlem, and to bring in Willie Mays, that was that was just awesome. And and his love for Harlem and all of that. I love that part. So
and also because Ira and myself and a lot of the people working on that show knew history. We knew history, and we were also liberals. I mean, it was like we want the truth out. We want it doesn't. I have no investment in erasing the past, the real past, with people being screwed over, with people being, with it not being fair or a level field, all of that stuff. It's like, you can't make things better unless you acknowledge that things aren't right.
Right.
Yeah. And, So
exactly.
Yeah.
So how did you feel when the Emmy nominations came out and there were 3 for this episode? I mean, that is just amazing. So I hear that it was art direction, which of course you've been talking about.
Of course.
They nailed it. That set and everything about it was so on point. Costume design, and my favorite, hairstyling, because I thought Cassidy Yates looked so on point as a black woman.
She did.
Yeah.
Right down to
she
the
looks like all the pictures
foundation.
of my relatives.
The slightly off foundation. Right. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, the cool part is that everyone working on Star Trek loved Star Trek. They loved the opportunity to tell a story because they all had grown up watching Star Trek. And so they knew that a story that you did right could last 20, 30, 40 years and beyond. So everyone was bringing their A game. Their absolute A game. Nobody was just saying, well, it's just a job and I'm just going to punch a clock. No, everyone, art department, makeup, everything. They were saying, oh, this is, let's really make this right because this is a jewel, and it shows. I mean, it really shows. And and also it's interesting. Armin told me an interesting thing as well, because my idea, as I said, was that these were not, there's one point where Avery was directing Armin to play the science fiction writer like Quark. And Armin said, no, this character is not Quark. This is not a 1950s version of Quark. This is a different person. And so he really held firm on that. And that was, of course, the right choice because that was the idea. The idea I had was that the science fictional versions of these characters, it's like Benny would be influenced by the people around him to create characters. In other words, so he's finding inspiration in his life for the characters he's creating in his stories. And so they didn't have to be one-to-one. So, they weren't the same people. And that was important, I thought. But it was super fun. Super fun.
I want to know whose idea was it to have Mark Talk, of all people, be the illustrator?
Right. That I never got.
He comes out with, he just looks like, he's there to fix the problem.
Talking about Cardassians. I thought he would talk about Klingons.
He's got all these great drawings. And I love that scene when he comes out and he gives them all their assignments. They all start taking their assignments.
It's so fun. And J.G. Hertzler, he's in Space Command as well. And he's a great guy and a wonderful actor. And all these guys, I mean, see, the other part that we really haven't talked about is what an astonishing cast the Deep Space Nine had, because it's like when you write something and the actors are going to really, really bring it, it's a joy because they come up with things different from what you would envision, but better, or it's like you're handing your baby over to someone who's going to raise it right.
Yes.
Yes. And so I can't fault any performance in that episode. Everyone's terrific.
Oh no, nope. They all did. They always did a good job. As you probably guessed, this Deep Space Nine is our favorite. Our favorite Trek. So yeah.
Well, but it's interesting because we all. It's funny because we all knew each other. We all talked to each other. We all were influenced by what others were doing. So, for instance, DS9 as it went on was being very strongly influenced by Babylon 5 and the idea of having an arcing story in terms of taking those kind of risks. And I think Ira had a lot of power over DS9. So DS9 is a very different show from Voyager, for instance, or from Enterprise, because those were much more the Brandon Bragg and Rick. And, and I don't think they were going for as deep a commentary on society as Ira was. I think Ira had a lot on his mind, and that's a good thing. That's an absolutely good thing. And so I mean, if you do it right, you don't take anything for granted. You're being given a wonderful opportunity to say something important, to do something worth doing, and I don't want to waste my audience's time. I want them to really get benefit from what I'm doing. So I bring my heart and soul to all of it, everything. So that's the job if you do it right. That's what I learned from Harlan and Ted Sturgeon and all my wonderful mentors, Ray Bradbury. Great people.
I'm interested. I know you alluded to it a little bit before, but your decision as a writer to really focus on television and television writing, like, can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Sure.
And what made that decision for you?
Yeah, well, first of all, I grew up with TV. I was like sort of the first generation of TV kids, and so TV was in my life very strongly, as well as books, of course. And but when I was young, I took a class from Charles Joffe, who had been Woody Allen's agent, then he became Woody Allen's producer. And I said, okay, Charlie, in film and TV, where's the power? And he said, okay, in film, it's the writer, director, hyphenate, or the director. The director's the main guy, sometimes the producer. In TV, it's the writer, executive producer, hyphenate, the showrunner. But basically, film is run by directors, TV is run by writers. And so I wanted what I wrote to be what got out to the audience. And so that's why I chose TV. I also like the speed of television. I like the fact that because of the economics, pretty much 95% of what I've written has gotten made, if not more. And now I have my own studio. So basically everything I write, I can shoot. There's no problem with that. And so, I like that. I mean, my friends who are screenwriters, many of them have earned a lot of money, but they haven't seen a single word they've written shot. They're just writing on assignment. That I would kill myself if that were my life. Money is not what rules me. I want a life of meaning. And and so it's I'm very proud of the work I've done, and I'm still doing it. So
awesome, yeah.
Hey, yeah. I'm telling you.
But I have one question I wanted to ask about. You mentioned that Avery put in his jazz influences.
Yes.
So my favorite part is when Jake says, "What are you talking about? Colored people on the moon?" Because I love Gil Scott-Heron.
Riding on the moon.
Right. So every time I hear that, that's all I think of. So I'm hoping that's why that was in there.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. And it's and I think Ira was also a jazz aficionado. So it was one of these things where any suggestion that made it more authentic, everyone said, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And everyone was thrilled because, again, you get on that slipstream where you're just, I don't know. It's funny, when you were talking about Ben, Cisco, and Benny, where the reality kind of impinges on each other. That's when you're a writer. That's sort of like what it's like, because you're living your life and you're going out in your world.
Yes.
You're seeing what's in your head. You're seeing the world that you're creating over as an overlay. And so it's very much that kind of flow as a writer. And so that was also another part of it. And but also the lovely part of it is it's a Star Trek episode basically saying, why is Star Trek important? It's like basically asking that question in a way that's sort of meta almost, because it's like it's asking what the validity of its own existence is. Right. And it comes up with a great answer, which is, well, we can really affect the world. We can really, because again, if you did a story, science fiction doesn't polarize the way that political discussions tend to, where all of a sudden everyone's on their own side and nobody's listening. But science fiction, somehow it gets through to people, and it not perfectly, but it does. I've talked to conservatives who are huge science fiction fans, and one of the things that was very gratifying to me was years ago, my wife and I were invited to a convention up north in California. And it was this Star Trek fan group, and they dress up like Star Trek, characters and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, Jesus. And then I found out that as part of us being a Star Trek fan group, they were doing charity works. That was, so they were giving blood and helping poor, children and whatever. It's like they were not just doing the superficial trappings of Star Trek. They were doing the heart of Star Trek and taking that into the world and doing something that meant something. And that was meaningful.
You just spoke to our hearts, because outside of the Syfy sisters, Yvette is also our commander on a ship, the USS Gerard Holder.
Great.
And that's our mission, is to help bring about the world that we want to see through work. Like, we're not just a ship that puts on costumes and hangs out together at the Denny's or something, Denny's. we're about doing work.
I think right now is a very precarious time. I think that democracy is under attack in a way that I've never seen in my entire life. I think that I never thought that racism would become so overt again. I mean, so much. I mean, it's cops are always killing people. I mean, cops are. I mean, that's okay. Yes, reform the cops, but the voting thing, it's like
the voting rights is the key.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like everyone should just take a bus to Washington, and like if 100 million people should go. I mean, this is huge, because if you
the voting rights are key. And what we're finding, okay, that's a whole nother podcast, but I mean, what I'm finding, I mean, I live in DC, so this is my world, and
yes,
I have a lot of thoughts on political strategy and what's gone wrong recently.
Yes.
Well, I think the key is that those local elections were really failing.
I agree.
At the local level. And I don't know that I want another march. I just want people to really get involved in their local politics, so we can't, keep putting in. I watched a thing on the television the other day from a school board out in one of the suburbs of DC, that they literally just did a coup.
Yes.
Conservatives just did a coup on the school board, ousted the school board president with no repercussions.
Right.
And it was just like, there was no democratic process. I mean, it was crazy.
Yes. Well, I remember
that is what we're living in.
Well, years ago, I was at the Smithsonian. There was an exhibit, and they had gotten these letters from the turn of the century, and they posted them on the wall. And one of the letters was amazing. It's from a black man in the South, and he was saying, "I went to my polling place to vote, and they wouldn't let me vote. Please do something about this. Please help me." And of course, he got no answer and no remedy. And if you're a student of history, you know what Reconstruction was, and then Tulsa with Damon Lindelof dramatizing the Tulsa massacre. That was interesting to see in Watchmen, because again, if you erase the history, that's the first place where a crime is being done, because so I mean, that's again where we need to speak the truth, and it's not like, oh well, there's one side and there's another side. No, there's evil and good. In this case, it's like if the moment you take away the vote, I mean, we're not headed toward Republicans winning. We're headed toward like totalitarianism winning.
Absolutely,
yes. It's Putin's world, or the Chinese government, or any of these totalitarian states. And I'm a student also of the Third Reich and all of that. This is the same playbook. It isn't different, and
right.
I think one other thing that did make me very sympathetic to the issue of race was the fact that my family came out of the Holocaust, and my grandfather was drafted in the Russian army, and he deserted and made his way to World War I and was a cook in the American army for World War I, then came to America and brought his wife over and my aunt over, and my mom was born in Chicago. But everyone else in his family and everyone else in his village was exterminated by Hitler. So if my grandfather hadn't deserted the army in Russia at that time, he would have been exterminated. My mom would have been exterminated, my aunt. So I wouldn't exist. And that's not, I mean, when they talk about, well, slavery is over. No, it isn't. I mean, it hasn't ever ended, because people are still being denied the vote. They're still trying to, it's not where I'm,
right. It's because, in this country, it's very easy to, like you say, what happens is people morph to white. Yes. There was a time when Irish was the minority, and then now they have now morphed to white. Yes. Italians used to be, and they are now white. Yes. And the same thing with, even Jewish. You can go for a long time because you're white. Right. You can't morph.
Right. I can go anywhere.
So it never ends.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, also, what I try to explain to my friends is I say, look, it's just you want to get up and you want to go through your day and you don't want to have to be fucked with. You don't want to have to deal with it. You want to be treated the same. It's not.
That's it. Not better. Not worse, just the same.
Yeah, and that doesn't go to the issue of reparations or any of that stuff. That's another conversation.
Right.
Yes. There's you can go back and back and back, and there's always going to be stuff to clean up and fix and do better. But just on a day-to-day basis,
right?
It's like Christ, it's like, and again, that's where Uhura was great until she did the fan dance in Star Trek V.
We don't talk about Star Trek V.
We don't. But I mean, but by the way, when we filmed the Space Command scene at Michelle's house, at the end of the day, she came up to me and she said, "Thank you for gracing my home." And that was just like, this is a grand woman. She is
wow,
and so beautiful. I mean, again, amazing people. I just So so the bottom line is, Star Trek has graced my life, and you're gracing my life now, and all of these wonderful people I've gotten to know and work with, and from Chip Delaney and Octavia Butler and all these. These are miraculous people, and I've been honored to be part of this world. Every day is Christmas for me. I've
got a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
I'm just wondering, because I'm looking at the list of television credits that you have.
Yeah,
and I'm just going to read
sleep.
a couple of them. Okay, it's like the Smurfs.
Yes.
He-Man and Masters of the Universe, The Incredible Hulk, Swamp Thing, Friday the 13th, The Real Ghostbusters, Tech Wars, Star Trek, of course, Sliders, The Mummy. It goes on and on. Babylon 5, Mantis, everything.
Yeah.
So what are you watching now? 2001 had all these sci-fi series on, and just blab it out. What was the thing that got you this year that you were like, wow?
I just finished watching Station 11, and it started slow, but it really kind of got its feet under it. I really liked it.
Did it?
Yeah.
Okay. I tried. I tried. I didn't get far. Okay. I just have to let it go, huh?
You have to basically get to episode 3 before you get past a lot of the bullshit, and then it really, really works. It really works.
The Expanse.
The Expanse. I'm going to be watching The Expanse, the ending of The Expanse today.
Yes.
I'm also reading the final novel. So and there's a lot I like about that show. I'm currently creating a new show with the two creators of The Expanse, of the show, Mark Ferguson and Hawk Ostby, and I'm creating another show with Rockne O'Bannon, who created Farscape and Defiance and so forth. But I like those shows. Let me think, what else? There's a lot of bad science fiction shows. There's like Raised by Wolves. It's like, what the what?
Okay,
what was that?
What the heck was? Okay, so I have people that were just going off about it, and I watched it, and I don't understand. What is the point of this whole show? I don't even know what they're trying to do.
I don't know. And Foundation was gorgeous, but it's like I could not get into the characters. It's sort of like
it looks good. It looks really good.
It was gorgeous.
But I tell you that
we loved Roxanne Dawson.
Empire was the character. That triad, and all three of those actors brought. Just really made that so riveting.
Yeah.
But I kept going with Foundation, like, where are we going? Like, what are we doing? Yeah. What are we talking about? It felt a little aimless, and I really wanted to root for it. When Roxanne Dawson got in that director's chair, though, baby, come on now.
Yeah, I love Roxanne. She's great. It's very funny. I was at the Star Trek convention in Vegas before that, like a while ago, and she was there. And of course, I know Roxanne from our work in Star Trek, and she's terrific. And so we had talked about getting together at the convention, but then it was late at night and blah blah blah, and I thought, well, I can always have lunch with her in a week or two here in LA, because she lived in LA. So I get back to LA and I reach out to her to set out lunch, and she's moved to Lincoln, Nebraska. It's like, oh no. So I'm going to have to fly to Lincoln, Nebraska at some point and take her out to fly. She's wonderful. She's another person I very much want to work with again, and she's wonderful. And I'm actually trying to get her to act, to come back to acting as well. And
what about Space Command?
Yeah.
If you're listening.
And we know you are.
You are. Marc wants you for another project, okay? And we want you to be the next director of a Star Trek movie. I just want to put that out there. Why isn't Roxanne directing the next Star Trek movie?
Yes.
And when she gets that deal, make sure you come tell us.
Yeah. But no, I mean it's really fun to be doing all this stuff, and it's very meaningful to me. And and I now have my own YouTube channel, Mr. Syfy, and
which is really cool.
Yeah,
it's
great.
There's a lot going on that one. I was like, wow, baby, I love this.
If you haven't seen that channel, you need to go on and see that channel. It's so cool, and especially if you have any interest in the history of sci-fi at all. Like, there's so much going on there. Like, you will find
what you want.
And you will learn something.
Yeah. Well, also, one thing that's great, and I applaud what you guys are doing, is that when I was a kid, there were 3 networks, and even when I was writing for the studios and the networks, if you wanted to create science fiction TV or whatever, you had to have millions of dollars. You had to shoot on film. You needed a studio or a network, or even in books, you needed a major publisher. And thank God now none of that is true. You can get a YouTube channel for free. You can edit on a computer. You can shoot with your phone. You can get your voice out. You can get what you care about out into the world. And I think that's terrific. I just wrote a new book called Greenlighting Yourself, and it's going to be coming out.
I'm buying it.
Yeah, it's going to be coming in the next few months. Yeah, from Silman James, my publisher. But it's about, again, how we can make this happen, because my fans gave me $3 million to build my own studio and start shooting Space Command. Wow. And that came from me, my audience. And so
our fans, if you're listening,
we hope you are.
The account to drop the money in is
but that's why I wrote this book, to basically free people from thinking that they need the studios or the networks to wave the magic wand and make their dreams come true. We can all make our dreams come true just by, there's power in numbers, I mean, when I was a kid, one thing I didn't mention was when I was a kid, they were going to cancel Star Trek at the 2nd season. And I was a little kid with a sign picketing NBC with all the other Star Trek fans, with B. Joe Trimble. Yes. And I was
you and me, Mark.
And and NBC got 1 million letters, and they renewed the season for a third. They renewed the show for a 3rd season. And without that 3rd season, there's no telling if Star Trek would have thrived in syndication, which is when
it wouldn't have been enough episodes, right?
Yeah. And so even then, it was all of us, the fans, recognizing that this thing was of value when the studio itself, when the network itself didn't. So we have power. We just have to use it. And now, we got to keep the vote. Got to keep.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. That is important. Understatement, right?
Yeah.
I have another question. You said I could ask anything, so here's my question.
Please.
You've been in all of these writer rooms in all of these different shows and this and that, and Star Trek. Diversity. We praise it and we love it, and creators of Far Beyond the Stars. But why do you suppose that we haven't seen Black writers in the Star Trek writing room?
It's an interesting question. Even to discuss racism even more directly, when I started writing for live action TV shows, I would literally have to say in the script, this is a Latino nun, this is a Black, I would have to really call it. And my bosses would say, well, can we make this a white character? And I would say no. And I would draw the line. I would say no. And when I was my first staff job was a story editor on Friday the 13th series, and that's when half of the episodes would be written in-house and half would be freelance. And we would often do page 1 rewrites on the freelance scripts because they didn't know the show as well as we did, the characters and all that. But so every day they were sending in writers to pitch to us, and I noticed that all of the writers were white men. So I said, well, let's shake it up. Let's start having in women and people of color. And they started doing that. And this is like the late 80s or 1987. And I know, so what I saw was that it wasn't that the racism was deeply entrenched. It's just you needed somebody to say, hey, let's do it differently. Mm-hmm. And many of the writers who came in, it was their first sale, and then they went on to have careers in TV. But you have to be extremely it's funny, for many, many years, they would talk about diversity, but they didn't mean it. It was just lip service.
Right, of course.
Now, see, the color they really care about is green. And with Shonda Rhimes making them tons of money, now you start to see Black lead roles, Latino, etc. One thing I did in Space Command was one of our continuing characters is a Latino, Victor Manso, and I said to him, I want very much to do a storyline in Spanish, entirely in Spanish. And so during the pandemic, we actually did a 2-hour bonus episode that the actors shot their own scenes in their own homes with their own cameras, with us, overseeing it via Zoom and all of that. And I actually wrote a role that Victor, had a great scene where he's talking to his father and he's introducing his fiance, and the father's estranged. And it's this really heartwarming character scene entirely in Spanish. And again, as you read the subtitles, it falls away that it's in Spanish. You're just interacting with those people. And it's my favorite scene in the entire thing. And, but the reason there's no Black women in the writer's room, since I'm not in those writer's room, I can't answer that question other than to say that there should be, but I wonder why there isn't more, why there aren't talented writers in the Star Trek writer's room. I don't know. Let's put it this way.
I'm with you. I'm sorry. I've put some folks on blast already. Yeah. I'm looking for the quality that I'm used to having, and I'm not getting it.
No, it's, you have to, what guides me in my writing is compassion. I need characters who are courageous, compassionate, who reach out to others and reach across boundaries and barriers. My heroes are heroes because they're coming from the heart and the right thing. They're not heroes because we say they're the hero. It's like for me, Star Trek Discovery and Picard, with the first season at least, was they have the shape of Star Trek without having the heart of Star Trek, in my opinion. And they're not doing a good job of character development. I don't know who these people are, and, but it's like, I've heard Prodigy is good. I've heard Lower Decks is good. I haven't had a chance to get to them yet, but all I can do is take responsibility for my own work. And so with Space Command, that's what I'm doing. We had wonderful Mira Furlan, whom we lost, but she's great in it in the episodes we got to have her in. And, but again, it's just, but also you have to remain open to the world. You have to remain open to suffering of others. You have to keep your heart open. That's fortunately my wife. I've been with my wife for 45 years. We've been married for 44. We write and direct and produce together, and we combine our ages. We're 142 years old, and but
you look great.
Thanks. Talking. I tell my friends that I'm tempted to run off these shirts for all of my friends that just say ambulatory, and it's like, but the point is, it's like the reason I have my own studio now, the reason I'm doing Space Command the way I'm doing it is because I don't want the studios or the networks to decide what of mine gets made. If I have a passion for something, I want to be able to get it made. That's it. So and also these wonderful actors, like all these wonderful actors, Michelle.
Everybody, you have everybody in there.
I'm giving them roles that are worth doing, and not just empty bullshit. So I can't. So in terms of Star Trek Discovery, God knows. I think it's the same flaw that infected a lot of the recent Star Wars movies, where you say, well, we're just going to make it different than it's been. But sometimes different isn't the right answer. The right answer is follow an emotional line.
Yeah.
Create characters we care about and have them do, acts of of bravery and not, that doesn't mean jumping off a mountain. It means, saving someone who deserves to be saved, taking the hard choice, the selfless choice. It's all this. The characters in Star Trek prior to this were heroes. They were actual heroes. There's so many characters on Discovery. I can't figure out what the deal is. It's like, what's her name? The one from the evil universe who's supposed to be
Giorgio.
Yeah, you have her eating, Doug Jones's race, and then
yes.
And somehow suddenly we're supposed to kind of like her and find her whimsical, but she's one gag over and over and over again. It's like, this is not a character. This is, I don't know, blah. But anyway, So, but yeah, we could.
I know.
go down
that.
that
I feel like there's room for growth. I mean, like I keep rooting. I like it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Like I will watch it and I root, and of course, like I root Sonequa Martin Green every week. It gives these amazing performances. Like the talent on there is amazing, you know. But I look for storytelling.
I know.
You know, I mean, I'm a writer at heart. Yes. I know it's not easy. I mean, I have not published a thing in my life, but it is the thing that I like to do when I'm not doing other things, like making money.
But
you've
read enough stuff to know,
you know. And I'm an avid reader, and I know what a good story is. I know what a tight story is, and I know when I'm getting a lot of extra dialogue that I don't need. Like I know how to self-edit. You know.
Well, you know, it's like. But here's the other thing. I mean. The science fiction we love, it actually knows what it's saying. It has a point. It's not clutter and noise, and it's just, you know, it's like, for instance, you know, one of the things that people tend not to notice or talk about is the fact that whole generation of writers in the 60s and 50s, Rod Serling and Gene Roddenberry and so forth, they all went through World War II. So these, with Rod, when he came back from the war, I refer to that whole generation of men as young old men, because they lived, they saw life and death, they saw their own mortality, they saw suffering, they were deepened by the war, by that experience. And so Roddenberry was that way, and so was Serling, and so they had something to say, they had something to get off their chest, and I think a lot of the TV writers you have now have just watched TV, and they don't really. They're faking it, you know. They don't have a lot to say or anything to say, and I think that's, you know, when they say what are most, you know, TV shows and movies about, you say, well, they're about an hour or 2 hours, you know, that's it, you know. It's like they're not you know, and but that's where I was so lucky to be.
Is that why you think we have so many reboots? Because I'm always amazed that it's just like where is the original stuff? And
Yes. Well, yes, because the executives want to keep their job. And so if they look at something that was successful and they say, okay, we'll just redo this successful thing. If it tanks, at least they may not lose their job. Whereas if you risk with something that's original, they probably will if it tanks, and most things tank. But again, see, the lovely thing about the journey that I've been on is that I don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. All I have to do is, worry about what I'm doing. I mean, we're talking to Netflix, we're talking to Amazon, if they want to pick up Space Commander, the other shows that I'm doing, the new Rod Serling show that I'm going to be doing, all these other things. We're doing 6 series. It's called the Showrunners Network. And, but if they want to partner with me, that's fine, but they don't get to say what I'm doing, and the show I'm creating with Rock is called Sweet Haven. And it stars Barbara Bain, Veronica Cartwright, Michael Harney, Bob Picardo, Ethan Phillips. I mean, it's a wonderful cast, and so we've written the pilot. Now we're going to be shooting it in the next few months. And
awesome.
We go. It's fun.
Listen,
fun.
You get something with Cinnamon Carter in it. I'm watching that. Barbara Bain, you just said the magic words.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah.
She's wonderful. And Gates McFadden is in it too. So Gates McFadden is in it as well. And so it's going to be fun. But again, I'm, but Christina Moses, we have a couple of projects we're going to be doing together. And, because if you haven't ever seen World Enough in Time, that's on my channel. It's the Star Trek New Voyages episode I co-wrote and directed and executive produced. And that's where Sulu it's the ultimate Sulu episode. George Takei stars in it. And I cast Christina Moses as his daughter. And it's a phenomenal piece of work. I'm very proud of it. And it's worth, so you might want to check that out. Because I said to George, when I invited him to be in it, I said, you never got the Sulu episode you deserved. You never got the great Sulu episode. And I said, this is it. And this is it. And I said to him, when we were shooting it, I said, a year from now, we will be in Japan screening this episode to an audience. And then afterwards, you'll be answering questions in Japanese and I'll be answering questions in English because he's fluent in Japanese. And I said, a year after that, we'll be nominated for the Hugo. And that's exactly what happened. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't wait to watch that. I have not seen that yet. But I
definitely gonna watch that.
Firing that up tonight, probably.
Yep. What always gets me too is that everybody always talks about Shatner's episode in Twilight Zone, and they rarely, if ever, talk about George Takei's episode in Twilight Zone.
Yes.
And it's like, you haven't seen the one where he's in the attic with the crazy white man? What?
Yeah.
Right?
And
a lot of us haven't, because guess what? Guess which one episode didn't get played that much?
It wasn't in syndication. It wasn't in syndication for many years. And it's very funny because I was trying to figure out why it wasn't in syndication because I couldn't come across anything about it. So I said, well, the George Takei's characters say his parents were, signaled the planes into bomb Pearl Harbor. There was no case of Japanese Americans being traitors to the U.S. during the war, and maybe there were planes. So that I was a guess, but then it wasn't coming out on DVD. It wasn't coming out on home video. So I said to Rod's widow, Carol, I said, why is this episode not being released? And she said, oh, because you said in the Twilight Zone companion it was racist. I said, no, Carol, no, release it, please, release it.
Oh
and they did. And so
well, if you're listening, it's on Paramount Plus TV, so you could get it there. Go to the Twilight Zone channel; it is there. I saw it the other day.
Well, it was really fun because I produced the Twilight Zone Blu-ray set, and I got to do 52 commentaries. So I did a commentary on that episode with George Takei and the director Robert Butler, who was actually the first director of Star Trek. He directed The Cage.
Yeah,
and just to sit down with them and talk through that whole episode was just such a gift,
Go to the Syfy guy and watch the Twilight Zone episode there.
Yeah,
right. Watch it there.
There. He's got the rest of the stuff on it there.
Right.
It's an amazing episode. And I know there's a couple of Star Trek episodes that don't really go into rotation so much. The one where they are in the Nazi uniforms. It's not shown in some places. So there are definitely a few episodes that get kind of pulled back. But if you can find this one with George Takei, it is amazing.
It's great. There's
the gremlin on the wing.
Yes. Well, the funny thing is, Star Trek and the Outer Limits and Twilight Zone, every episode is not a jewel. I mean, the Space Hippies episode of Star Trek, it's like, and I'm embarrassed to say that I know all those songs from that episode. So it's like,
as well you should, young man.
But I mean, again, it's wonderful to be shaped by such good-hearted material. I mean, thank God for science fiction, and I was very lucky to be here in LA growing up because that's how I got to. Well, I actually even went on the set of Star Trek when I was a kid. I got it for a Christmas present. I was on the set of the last episode of Star Trek ever shot, Turnabout Intruder. And so I sat in the captain's chair. I stood on the transporter and saw the little screw-in light bulb, above.
It was meant to be, Mark. It was meant to be.
Great. It
totally
was wonderful. So it's been a terrific time.
We're so grateful that you had some time to sit down with us and talk. I mean, it's really been so cool, a delight. You know, I mean, it's been a delight. It's been awesome to hear all these wonderful things and knowledge that and aspects and viewpoints that we wouldn't have heard before, we wouldn't have known. In fact, I mean, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a joy. It's been a joy, talking with you. And again, if there's one message to be taken from all of this, it's like, speak your truth and don't stop. It's like, it's not about. They'll try to shout you down, all of us, when we speak the truth, because the truth is not comfortable for those who are trying to rob us of our basic rights. And the reason I love television is very loud. And when it manages, rarely on occasion, to speak the truth, that's a truth that goes all around the world and it lasts forever. So thank you.
Those words, Brother Betty.
Yeah. Well, so thanks, guys. And if you ever get to LA when the pandemic's done, if it ever finishes, you're welcome to come visit my studio and see this.
Don't even think I won't.
Be careful what you ask for, Mark.
No joke, because you are going to wake up one day, we're going to be like, hello.
Yeah. Well, I'll show you one thing in parting. Over here, I own among the things I own via my studio are 17 spacesuits. So the
Oh
one,
my God! It's
the one with Spock in it is the Tholian Webb spacesuit.
Yes.
When we shot the George Takei episode,
listeners, you guys can't see this, but we're looking at something really cool.
So we created the Tholian Webb spacesuit.
You might have to do a little. You might have to You have to clip this out so everybody gets to see that.
Stuff.
Oh my God!
Watch the Tholian Webb.
Yes.
And look at Spock's suit.
Yeah.
And you will see what we just got to see.
Yes. It's silver lame. It's like a Las Vegas spacesuit. It's great.
I love it. I love it.
Well, thank you all. It's been wonderful having our time together. I'm happy to do it anytime. And if you're in LA, definitely come and see the alien spaceship we're building and all that stuff.
Hey, Mark, you want to let people know where to find your stuff?
Yes. It's the Mr. Syfy. That's SCI-FI. Mr. Syfy channel on YouTube. And if you forget that, just remember Marc Zicree and Twilight's Own Companion, and you can find your way via the internet to me. And Mr. Syfy is free, and you can watch the first hour of Space Command there. You can watch World Enough in Time. You can watch all the stuff I'm up to.
Awesome. Yvette, you want to let folks know where they can write us or get in touch with us?
Sure. You can find us at syfysistas.com. That's SYFYSISTAS.com. Join us on the mothership. That's MUTHASHIP. And the Syfy Sistas Book Club, both on Facebook. Download the Trek Geeks Network app, where you can find us and our family of podcasts on the Trek Geeks Network. On Instagram, syfy.sisters. And we are also on the Twitter at Syfy Sisters. After listening to this podcast, please rate us and write a review. We may read it on an upcoming episode.
Thank you. And also those views on Disco that I stated, those are mine alone, Tamia's. So if you have hate mail, you can send them to me.
You can send me some too, because I have problems with Disco too.
I'm having some issues, and I'm standing by it, and I'm speaking my truth.
And Picard.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. We can't wait to see you soon in the universe, around the way, on the next planet, first star to the left and on till morning, etc. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Peace, love, and hair grease. Hey, y'all. Are you looking for that perfect holiday or birthday gift for that special geek in your life? Why not check out the world's first app-enabled Tribble from Jay and Kaylia at Science Division. These soft and cuddly fuzz buckets actually trill for friends and squeal at Klingons. Adopt your Tribble today at Science Division. That's sciencediv.com. Science Division. By fans, for fans. Trouble's never been this fun.